On today's episode of Water Cooler Weekly, we are joined by Brent Ryan from the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. Brent shares his story on how he ended up at VACCA and touches on the importance of the work that they do as an organisation and just how crucial a change in mindset is needed from people in order to make progress on the many issues that they as an organisation are trying to tackle. It was an incredibly insightful episode that I hope many people will take as much out of it as I did. If you could please like and subscribe on whichever platform you are either watching or listening to this on, I would be forever grateful. But please, most importantly, enjoy this episode with Brent. It is my pleasure now to welcome on Brent Ryan from the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. Brent, thank you for joining me today, mate.
No worries, Chris. How are you, mate? Well done on the podcast. It's been very good listening.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, there's been some early runs on the board. Is always good, especially to get someone like yourself to come on and talk to us a little bit about a really good subject and something that a lot of people will learn a lot of things from. I'm definitely going to learn a few things. So before we get into that, how are things going during lockdown? I know you bought a place with your lovely better half. How's everything going with the house?
Yeah, no, it's good, mate. I've probably upped my trade skills from a 1 to a 3. I bought a drill and a saw. So yeah, no excuses not to chip away at little jobs here and there, but I just want to have people over, mate, and have a beer. So it'd be nice to do that eventually. But yeah, we're in a pretty good position compared to a lot of other people during this unique period for sure.
Yeah, I bought my first toolbox maybe 2 months ago when I moved place from Kmart, and I don't think I started at probably a 1 with the trade skills like you.
Yeah.
I think I'm down to a -1.
Lost confidence.
I'm absolutely in another planet. It's not for me. But anyway, so as I mentioned, so you work for the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. Before we get into your role there and what you've been doing and what VACCA does, maybe just give us a little bit of a background on yourself, your work journey, and how you find yourself where you are today.
Yeah, no worries. Before I formally start, I might just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the countries that you and I are on today. You're in Northcote Way, I think. So the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and also emerging. And to, I don't know how many people have been joining in, mate, but to any Aboriginal people listening as well, welcome. But so what am I now, 29, similar to yourself, and straight out of year 12, I went to uni, did a Bachelor of Business, pretty straightforward, so I kind of set up, but hustled through, and then all I wanted was a full-time job. All I wanted was to get into work, earn some money. Had some luck at like the Grand Prix and Tennis Australia, and did some pretty cool things there, meeting, Serena Williams and being security to Novak Djokovic and carrying the trophy around and all these kind of things. And that was okay, but it was a lot of like 9-10 month contract work, and it was pretty long hours during the events. And then through playing footy at Greensborough Footy Club, I was lucky enough to meet a guy called Matthew Hyde, who at the time and still is the principal of Parkfield College. Now, Parkfield College is a school inside the Melbourne Youth Justice Centre. So it's the only school inside Victoria's juvenile prisons, I suppose, is the easy way to put it. And
yeah,
I know a little bit about that. We both played in the back line. We talk footy, we talk work, we talk other stuff. And he said, mate, the holidays are coming up and we teach kids every day of the year because the kids don't leave the prison, obviously. And I said, oh, yeah? And you're telling me that because? And he goes, well, I reckon you'd go all right as a bit of a casual PE teacher. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got 2 weeks off before I start at the Grand Prix. Maybe I'll come in. And went in and I just thought, it'd be good money, which it was. And, PE, how hard can that be? And it was pretty easy. Like the kids, 17, 18, 19-year-olds really got around me. I enjoyed it. And then we, continue to play footy for another year. And then the next year, he said, Brent, how do you like landing a full-time job? And I'm like, mate, I've got a 6-month contract. It's starting to do me a little bit, to be honest. And he goes, well, why don't you come in and teach the rest of the year in the PE space? And So I said, yeah, no worries. I did that. And then during the PE classes, there'd be like obviously your normal day and PEs in every session. So when I had some downtime, I'd jump into a classroom and see a maths class or literacy class and see kids actually learning. And I said, how are kids learning in this space? Like, it's a juvenile prison. We've got, kids that have been charged with murder, rape, pedophilia, all these kinds of horrendous crimes, but they're learning and they're engaged in education. And I just thought, shit, that's pretty cool. So end of that year, Matt came to me and said, there's this program called Teach for Australia. So where they pick 120 people Australia-wide who have got an undergrad to do this Masters of Teaching. And he goes, are you interested? You get to apply and whatnot. And I did it, got in. And so for the next 2 years, so 2016 and 2017, I studied a Masters of Teaching 1 day a week, every Wednesday. I'd have blocks 3 or 4 times a year. And those other 4 days, I was lucky enough to teach my own class in the youth justice setting. So it was a bit of a career change from, events and security at Australian Opens to teaching in a prison, but definitely very rewarding. So
there's a lot to unpack there. First off, you being security for Novak Djokovic, I think his broken racket would provide more security than you would.
Yeah, and that's probably more dangerous than working in the prison, to be honest.
That's that's something I definitely didn't know. One question I have with the classes and that, how did you find the kids' engagement was?
Yeah, so a lot of these kids, as I said, 16, 17, 18, and they've been expelled or suspended from multiple schools since probably year 7. So in Victoria, every kid up until the age of 17 has to be enrolled in a school. So these kids, for some reason, schools weren't enrolling them into their local school, weren't taking them, or they weren't going, they're absent. So they had a negative, I suppose, association with high school. I mean, I didn't love school, but I went, and I came from a background where I was supported to go. But a lot of these kids have got, parents that were locked up or passed away or not supportive. So for them to be in a classroom space is big for them, and that's to be celebrated. So even if they're sitting in a class, not throwing a chair is a big win. And that's something that I initially thought, yeah, okay, fair enough. To get them engaged, we're lucky that, my partner's a teacher and a lot of teachers that have 20, 25 kids in a class. And it's pretty factory-like, they hop on the system and they just go through the motions, where our kids, we only have 5 or 6 in a class at all different levels. But I could tailor it to whatever they wanted. So when they wanted to learn about sport, I'd love that, because I could talk about, my footy stats or Collingwood on the weekend or whatever it was. A lot of them like cars, so you could tailor it around different stuff like that. So you have that flexibility. I mean, sometimes, and that's what VACCA, the Victorian Curriculum of Applied Learning, lets you do. You have more flexibility than, say, a VCE where you've got a study guide. There is a bit of stress in the planning of it all, but when you see the kids learning and engaging, you get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen the show Last Chance U on Netflix.
Not yet.
No, okay. So it's a very interesting documentary about a community college in America that's known as a place where all these really good and impressive American football athletes go when they get kicked out of big time universities. And the interesting part around a lot of it is a lot of these kids, have been 5-star athletes who have been given a free rein to do whatever they want through primary school, high school, because they're just exceptional athletes, and certain schools would do anything to get these type of players. But, when you get to a university level, and there's a lot more of a structure it's not even like negotiable. Like, you have to go to class every day. You have to do this. There's no turning a blind eye. And a lot of these kids have literally never faced that. And that's why they find themselves, getting in trouble, getting thrown out of the schools. And it's a really interesting topic, because, these schools have teachers and staff members who are employed specifically to help teach these kids a lot of the time, who are, like in that 17, 18 to 19 age bracket, when to teach them how to do like the base, like you say, like literally getting
Grade
to
2
class.
maths.
Being in class is a win. So yeah, it's one thing I'm very fascinated by, because you obviously the cameras are around these kids all the time, which you obviously don't see a lot of things that probably go on, but it is really interesting to see a lot of these kids sort of show up to the class and look relatively uninterested, but then they show a real vulnerability to when they talk to the teachers or this support staff, and they just say, I don't know how to do this. Like, it might seem easy to say you and me, but it's very difficult for kids who have come from a broken home or have had all of these issues where a simple task, they don't have the confidence, or they've never physically been put into like a situation where they're getting that quality one-on-one time with a teacher because they're viewed as a problem student, and schools just don't want to deal with it. So
100%.
No, that is really interesting. How long were you at the prison for? Or sorry, it's not a prison, is it?
Youth Justice Centre, yeah.
Youth Justice Centre, yeah.
Yeah, and the Department of, or DHS staff call them clients, and I just call them students, so they don't get angry with me like that. But just almost 4 years. So I finished the Masters in end of 2017, and then headed up the highway to Malmesbury, where the older boys are. So they're sentenced and a bit more kind of structured and regulated and settled. And I stayed there till September 2018 before I moved to VACCA.
Okay. What did you find the differences were with the older kids?
Yeah, so I was learning all these things. I mean, to study and work at the same time, I think is a beautiful thing, like, because you can implement what you're learning into your practice.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for me, I was learning this teaching or master's teaching degree, and I was learning about sequencing lessons and feedback and reporting and all these kind of things. But at Parkville, at the centre in Carlton there, I couldn't actually practice any of them because there were so many codes, or classes weren't happening because of minimal staff with the department. Kids were in lockdown, all that kind of stuff. So Malmesbury, there's this, I think I probably at Parkville had 40% of my classes cancelled. So that was, as a first year teacher, that was doing my head in. So I said to the principal, Matt, my mate from footy, I go, mate, I want to help the highway. It was 3.5 hour round trip per day. And I did carpool with a mate, Ben Shelton, but I taught every class. I missed one class for the year. So I could actually put these things into practice, and the kids were a lot more settled, a lot more mature. I'd work out in the gym with them in between classes, coach the Malmesbury footy side. So think of longest yard, that was me. And I'm actually, unfortunately, the last ever coach of the Malmesbury Tigers because our boys were a bit naughty one day. So the only time I've been in the paper. But so a lot better time to teach and learn for me as much as the kids as well. But yeah, as you said, no positive role models in their life a lot of the time, and that would fall on to me sometimes. But the issue was, and part of the reason I joined VACCA, which I'll touch on in a minute, is they get out and then I wasn't around, or they weren't tied in with enough supports to stay out, and they come back in. So that was pretty deflating at times as well.
Yeah, it is. It's a very delicate subject to talk about because I think a lot of the time structure is so important to people in this situation. And then, when they sort of don't have it, and you get sort of almost a sense of a little bit more freedom, and you're almost on your own. It's very easy to slip back, I guess, into old habits. And
it's like COVID at the moment, mate. People not having structure and they don't know. It throws people all over the place.
It does. Yeah. I mean, if you think about COVID right now, I just know for me personally, I've been trying to do things completely differently, but, try and learn new things or whatever it is. But then there's a large sort of comfort around having what as well. And I guess a lot of people are sort of feeling that right now. And, you don't want to sort of, step too far out because of, how much of an unsettling time it is. But that's another kettle of fish. But Got to be philosophical every now and then. All right, so you finish up at Malmesbury and you head off to VACCA.
Yeah, and I suppose all this social worky stuff and teaching, like, I love what I do, and I probably have for the last 4 or 5 years. And I remember saying to a mate, 4 or 5 years, this year, just gone on New Year's Eve, he said, Brent, what are your kind of 3 5-year goals? And I go, I don't really have any anymore. I just kind of do as I see. Something I enjoy, I'll chase it. I'll jump in the deep end, whatever. And then I said, why? What are yours? And he goes, one of them is to just enjoy my job, like wake up and really want to go to work. And I reflected, and I already knew that. And my mates know that I love what I do. And every day I wake up really keen. Like at the moment, I enjoy Monday to Friday more than the weekends, mainly because there's a bit of structure and routine. But just what I do, I don't see it as work. But yeah, I got to VACCA, so just over 2 years ago. It was a straight swap for a can of Coke and a future second rounder.
That's a huge trade for Malmesbury.
Yeah.
They've fleeced VACCA on that trade.
The main reason was one of my mentors, so the executive principal of Parkville College, so above Matt, who oversaw all the campuses, Parkville, Malmesbury, was a fellow called Brendan Murray. And he's my kind of mentor today. Still is, we catch up weekly. And he kind of flicked me an email and said, Brent, we should catch up for a coffee. He got ousted by the department because when they were sending, there was a few riots at Parkville, and they were sending Aboriginal young people to Barwon and the adult prisons, and he goes, that's not on. And the department wanted him to lie and say that there'll be school there, it's okay, when there's other beds at other of our facilities. So Brendan kind of stuck to his guns and got ousted by the department, but it does some consultant work at the moment with Nathan Buckley, with Vic Uni, VACCA, a lot of disadvantaged schools. He's a real kind of heavy hitter, but really humble. And he flagged this VACCA opportunity. So there was 2 reasons why I joined VACCA, and I'll talk about what they do in a minute. But as I said before, like a lot of kids in the prison would kind of get out, they were disconnected. And I felt like my work I could make more of an intervention at an early age. So, with young people rather than when they're 17, 18 in the system, it's hard to break that cycle, when your parents are in custody or jail, do the same thing. So that was one thing, because VACCA are all about keeping kids connected with their family and to their culture. And secondly, my father's side's Irish, but mother's side is Aboriginal. So a place called Balwina, where I know your cousin's from. So about 100k north of Swan Hill in New South Wales. And so that's the muddy people. And I found this out when I was kind of 16, 17, but never really, I suppose, untapped or uncovered much about that because I didn't really grow up in my Aboriginal community, which is really common. And secondly, there was no one around in my family that had information. And I was also 16, and what do we do at 16? We play footy, have a beer, chase girls, that kind of stuff. So I knew it, but I didn't really do anything about it. And then I was probably 23, 24, chatting to Brendan, who's also an Aboriginal man. His people are up kind of New South Wales coast. And we had these things in common, education. And he said, Brent, this is for you, this job. And I was really nervous early days because, as you know with me, mate, I'm pretty organised. I like to know everything I'm doing. And I didn't know much about being an Aboriginal man or an Aboriginal person. I didn't know much about the mob I was from and I know I was disconnected. So I was really scared to jump into an Aboriginal organisation where I'm surrounded by 60% Aboriginal people doing Aboriginal business. And I'm like, shit, I'm not going to know a heap here. I'm going to be pretty vulnerable. But the more people I meet every day at VACCA, the more people that I meet who are in a similar boat to me, and they might be younger, they might be older, they might have darker skin, they might have lighter skin. They're all Aboriginal, they've all got disconnection, and they're all on a journey. So mum grew up knowing she's Aboriginal, but not really proudly identifying, and that was in the 70s and the late 60s. And Aboriginal people weren't counted as citizens until 1969. And I think today is the safest time to identify as an Aboriginal person prior to colonisation, so prior to 1788. So I think, there's still racism and we know there's Black Lives Matter and all this kind of stuff, but I reckon today is the safest time to identify as an Aboriginal person since colonisation. Mum grew up in a commission house. Her parents died when she was, I think, 9 and 10. So she grew up and was raised by her older sister who knew a little bit about our Aboriginality, and she's currently doing some stuff with the Balranald Land Council at the moment around her story and casework and that kind of stuff, which is great. But yeah, and especially with I don't know how much you know about kind of the colonisation story, but New South Wales and Victoria were hit the hardest. So a lot of the language has been lost, a lot of the paperwork, the stories, the connections. So I look at mob up in Darwin and other Northern Territory, and I feel really grateful that they grow up in community, they have their language, they have all these beautiful things. Racism still exists, but so that's a little bit about why I suppose I joined VACCA. And yeah, my role for the last 2 years has been team leader of learning and development. So internally, we upskill our 700 staff around child protection and working with our kids in care, and externally to the sector. So it's a bit going on, but it's very rewarding.
Yeah, that's great stuff. What are a few things that really opened your eyes once you first started?
At VACCA?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was pretty raw, mate, as I kind of mentioned just before. So, and I'm a sponge. I love kind of learning. So
yeah, I guess you kind of feel like you don't want to overspeak, because both yourself and myself have never walked in the shoes of an Aboriginal man or woman, and we never will. So you kind of, in one hand, you don't want to overspeak, but I think probably what you'd find at VACCA is no one would look at you and not be helpful. Like everyone probably everyone's on the same page.
I was accepted from day one, and everyone's been, Brent, you're from Balranald, here's this person. So, for me to build these connections and try and fill the gaps. I know so much more about myself now in the last 2 years than I did in that first 27 years of my life. Like, I know who I am, and I'm pretty strong and confident in who I am as a person, but now I just feel so much fuller. And I imagine what I'm going to learn in the next 4 or 5 years about me and mum's side of the family. And I'm teaching her things about her family, which is pretty cool. And some people don't want to identify with their Aboriginality, which is common, unfortunately. A lot of our kids in care do that. But I think, and for me, I'm like, well, this is the oldest living culture in the world, and I'm a part of it. That's pretty cool, I reckon. So, yeah, when I started at VACCA, people would introduce themselves. They're like, oh, hey, Brent, welcome aboard. Where are you from? And I'd be like, I'm in Bundoora, a little apartment in Polaris there. And they're like,
I'm from the Valley.
Brent, no, where are you from? And I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, I get you now. So I'd say from Balranald and these kind of areas. I'd never been there at this stage. I have since. It's called a return to country, and I visited Balranald and Swan Hill and Mildura and all these parts of the world. But I'd never been there. But that's how our people introduce themselves, by where you're from, your country, your ties. So for me, that's second nature now. But at the start, I was like, I'm from Bundoora. I'm from the DV, That took a while to kind of get used to. But I do see why as well. It just creates a deeper connection straight away. Like if someone says, I'm from this neighbouring community, okay, well, we might know someone, and then we're off and we're chatting. Where, we run cultural awareness workshops, and I'll talk about if two non-Aboriginal or two people who don't know much about their background are having a barbecue, they might say, what do you do for work? Or good weather, isn't it? Like that's okay, that's conversation, but you just get deeper straight away when you talk about where you're from.
Yeah.
And I say the same thing with our people, like, the terms uncle and auntie, that they were pretty foreign to me at the start. And I supervised a team of 6 staff, 5 Aboriginal, and I had 2 kind of uncles in my team, so older Aboriginal staff, and that was pretty daunting at the start. They know so much about, community and the work and all that kind of stuff, but I was their manager. That was a bit weird, but I call them uncle now, and even when I got called uncle the first time from someone, I go, hang on a minute, I'm not your uncle. But that's just part of the culture, and it's a respect thing. And I was doing some tutoring for someone's daughter, and they just said, go say Uncle Brent. And it was beautiful, really. But at the start,
bit of a surreal moment, isn't it?
Yeah. And I suppose, with other people in training might mention, so how does this person want to be called? Well, it's just like William, ask him, does he want to be called Will, Bill, Billy? It's not just because we're Aboriginal people doesn't mean it's a completely different, engagement strategy. I think the other big one for me was the language that you use. And for me to really proudly identify as an Aboriginal person, because I hadn't been around that space before to do that. And the terms like half caste or 1/8 Aboriginal, these kind of things. I grew up saying, I'm an 1/8 Aboriginal, I'm a 5th, whatever it is, Aboriginal. And, 3 of my best mates who Sukowski, Panunzio, and Tsadakis, Greek, Polish, and Italian, they say, I'm a quarter this, I'm half that, you're 1/8 Aboriginal. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But the more I've got to learn about our culture, and we talk about this, is that it doesn't matter how much milk you put into a coffee, it's still coffee. Is because, and from the video Rabbit Proof Fence, if anyone has time to watch it after they hear this, that it was a real forced, deliberative plan from different governments, so Victorian colonial government, to breed out Aboriginal people, and they classified them as, full, half, quadroon, octoroon. So they would try and breed out Aboriginal people, and they moved them to missions and took kids away from parents to try and breed them out. So that classification or ranking, which I probably thought was okay, was really hurtful for Aboriginal people. So that's something that, a lot of people we find in our workshops don't really know still, and just got to be really careful, I suppose, about that. But what else? I suppose, do you know what I did at the start of the session when you kicked me off today?
You gave me a little welcome to country.
No, so close. It's an acknowledgement to country. So that's something that, again, it's just, and that's why I hope people listening today just pick up on little things that they can continue researching on. Like a welcome to country is done. You would have seen a few at Dreamtime at the G. A lot of people watch the footy, where the traditional custodians of that country perform it, and normally elders, where anyone can do an acknowledgement of country. So Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, and you're just paying respect to, I suppose, the land that is cared for so long, and the people that care for it. So that's another one that I am still learning a lot about, and everyone's different with how they do their, I suppose, acknowledgements. But like that, it's such a diverse culture. People say, "Oh, can you speak Aboriginal, Brent?" I'm like, "Well, there's not one.
There's
Aboriginal
not one language. No.
There's 38 in Victoria. There's over 280, Australia wide, and everyone has their own dialect. Some are finding theirs again, reviving theirs. Some have their language in dictionaries, and people can study it, and it's in schools and these kind of things. So just the diversity of Aboriginal people is massive as well, and something I'm finding more and more about. But I don't know what else I've learned. Aboriginal people don't get things for free, like probably a lot of people think. I like to think. I mean, me personally, I've received nothing from being Aboriginal, and a lot of my friends and colleagues. That's something that is probably not considered, and that disconnection and not knowing your lineage and where your family are from, and there's a Bringing Them Home report which talks about disconnection from culture and parenting skills being undermined when the stolen generation was happening, and we'll look at some stats in a minute I'll talk to. But Aboriginal people don't get things for free. There's Aboriginal services that are around, but that's an interesting one. But and there's also, I suppose, finally, like, it's a certificate of Aboriginality. So some of our young people in care, and my auntie's doing hers at the moment, like I mentioned before, sometimes you need a certificate of Aboriginality, or you can have it, and that is like, I suppose, a document that kind of confirms your Aboriginality. You don't need it, but you can have it, and that's needed just to access some services. And there's 3, I suppose, criteria for that. You need to be an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person. You need to identify as an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and you need to be accepted in the community in which you live or you're from. So the first one's pretty easy. Are you an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person? The second one, do you identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, can be difficult because, as I said before, my mum didn't really identify. Some people might not know because they're part of stolen generation or did grow up with family, the trauma, all that kind of stuff. And then the accepted in a community. So, I don't have a lot to do personally with my community in Balranald because there's not much of an Aboriginal community there at the moment that I've tied in with, but I am accepted by my Melbourne Aboriginal community. So they're things that we want our kids to get so they can access as many services as they need to. But I don't know. That's probably enough of the things I've learned for the moment. But learning every day, mate.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that right there is you need to be open-minded to learn. Like you touched on Rabbit Proof Fence. I think for me personally, we watched that at school, and that was the first real moment where an oh shit moment that, I really learned about Aboriginal history and what had gone on. We touched on before that. I do have some family in Balranald. My uncle Danny and my cousin Jade are both doing wonderful things, in the Aboriginal community. And for me, a big part of why this was really good to do was because, like you, I'm probably sort of at the start of my journey in terms of what you were when you first came on. Sort of your eyes are sort of really wide open and you're about to learn all these things, because I should know a lot more than what I do. And I think one of the biggest problems we probably have as a country right now is the fact that not enough people are willing to open or challenge that mindset of, whether that's, knowing different phrases are unacceptable, or, just challenging yourself to learn more things. And, that really starts within. And I'm more than happy to put my hand up and say that I haven't, in my life learnt anywhere near enough about Aboriginal Indigenous culture in this country. So it's great to see that, that you've challenged yourself to learn that, and, sort of have the mindset of, I'm going to continue learning. Like it doesn't stop.
Yeah, 100%. And it's good that, you said like individuals, it's on individuals to take their own learning on. I reckon sometimes it can't be on, just our Aboriginal people to run workshops or to tell you their story, because that's pretty taxing after a while. So as you said, the more you can learn or have conversations or research, it definitely makes you a better person. And it's Australia's history, a lot of this stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on a few of the different programs that VACCA has, and how they sort of create awareness, or how they what the aim is and how they reach the community.
Yeah, VACCA. Yep. So Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. When I used to meet people, I'd say, I work in a prison. They kind of got that straight away. And then they say, so what's VACCA? And I'm like, yeah, shit, how much time we got? But I said to our CEO the other day, I go, can we change our name from VACCA? She goes, Brent, no. Like, we're known for VACCA. We've been, we're one of the largest Aboriginal organisations in Australia. We've got over 700 staff just in Victoria at 10 locations. People have known us by VACCA and childcare agency. Well, then I thought, well, we're not a kindergarten, but we have kindergarten services, but it's childcare. So as I said before, majority of our services try to keep their Aboriginal kids connected with their Aboriginal family. And if they can't be with their family for a variety of reasons, then they'll try to keep them connected to culture. Because I think culture and education are the two things that keep the kids grounded and give them a chance, I think, to break those cycles. So VACCA was established in 1972. As I said before, there was the referendum in 1969 where Aboriginal people were counted, and these laws couldn't be made, just for Aboriginal people, like missions and protection acts and these kind of things. So there was this really big emergence of Aboriginal allies and non-Aboriginal allies. And we're a massive, I suppose, we call it an ACO, an Aboriginal Community Controlled Organisation. So there's a health ACO, a legal ACO, an education ACO. So you think of the main domains of life. There's an Aboriginal body for most, and we're, I suppose, the child protection space. So we're massive. As a core business is kinship care. So kinship care is when you stay with family. Foster care, which you probably would have heard of, is being placed with someone that's not your family. Residential care. A lot of our programs and team do a lot of training, so upskilling the sector on how to work with Aboriginal kids effectively, and just that intervening and advocacy, I suppose, as well. So there's like 60 odd programs that VACCA have, and I've been really lucky in my role to be able to kind of meet most of those people and what they do. So it's a pretty big scope of work, but always something happening, which is good.
Absolutely. Is there anything in particular that VACCA's done during say 2020 and COVID to ensure that a lot of these services are, a lot of these people, there's so many people that rely on them. What has VACCA had to do to ensure that these programs didn't just come to a complete halt?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, mate. Like when you do have client-facing roles where you need to show up every day and get your hands dirty and provide support or food for different clients, the show goes on. So like a lot of our, so I think out of our 700 staff, I reckon 600 would be working from home. So we'd have 100 in our different offices, and they're obviously taking the correct measures with PPE and social distancing and all that kind of stuff. So I happily lended up my desk and office and teacup for someone. So like they've been doing a really amazing work every day. Like our nurses and our frontline workers, everything they've been doing, making sure our clients are connected, tied in. I suppose a lot of the programs are just shifted to online. And like I say, this is my 8th Zoom today, I think, with you, just because Zoom's now the new coffee, isn't it? The new everything. So yeah, like been saying that, like something that we do with our cultural awareness workshop, it's not just something you just flip online. Like it's not just something you go, boom, there it is. There's the slides, we're on. Because a lot of the stuff that VACCA do and our team do, it's pretty sensitive. It's not just a marketing seminar or accounting balance sheet 101. It's stuff that is pretty sensitive and asks a lot of ourselves to give of ourselves as well. So that was quite difficult and took some time. But I think now everyone's really thriving. We had our whole staff in service last week, where we had our 700 staff kind of come together in a Zoom webinar, and we put that together, and everyone felt really connected. So it was nice to see. But mate, I reckon in my role and as a leader during this time, just staying connected with our team is more important than ever, because you're used to seeing and having your arm with everyone in the office and getting a coffee and these kind of things. And a lot of our staff can feel quite isolated. So a lot of check-ins and well-being and team meetings and these kind of things are super important. And yeah, my advice to our team has been, we can't wait till things are perfect to get stuck in. We sometimes just need to get it up, see how it goes, and just evolve as we go. Because otherwise, if we take too long to get it up, our clients or the sector are going to miss out, and then our kids suffer at the end of the day. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned before about some stats you wanted to get into.
Yeah. I suppose it was just an eye-opener for me, like the one biggest thing. So for me, I reckon personal stories mixed with data are the most moving. Like if you can tell me a really deep story or grab me, and there's some sort of data to back it up, you've got me. And I think that's a powerful way to get information across, whether it's positive, negative, or indifferent. And there's this yearly report, because it's called the Family Matters Report. And it's the most powerful bit of reading I've read in my last 3 years. Family Matters. It's published by SNAKE, who are one of the main Aboriginal bodies in Australia. And it's all around kind of legislation, data, policy. It sounds kind of quite boring, but some of the nuts and guts of it encapsulates what every state and territory in Australia are doing in regards to Aboriginal young people in care. And so obviously we're the Victorian body, and we do a significant amount of work there, but it's nice to see what's happening in other states. And so it hit things on the head really well. So I'm going to throw to you, Chris. What percentage of the population in Victoria do you think are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander?
That's a good question.
You can have a guess, mate. So the population of Victorians who identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander.
Who identify?
Yeah.
I'm going to say maybe 10%, maybe even less, maybe 8 to 10%.
Yeah, no, fair guess. So it's 1.8%.
Okay.
So when I talked before about, doing your own research and stuff, that's why people need to, because we make 1 in 50 people are Aboriginal. So that's not many when you look at it,
Yeah.
Not even 2%. So, and it's 3.3% in Australia, so a little bit higher kind of elsewhere. But in out-of-home care in Victoria, there's 11,000 kids who don't live with mum and dad, or they're in care, that have been removed. And out of that 11,000, so 1.8% of kids are Aboriginal in Victoria, or people are Aboriginal in Victoria. What percent of Aboriginal people make up that 11,000? So what percentage of Aboriginal kids make up the out-of-home care space?
Well, I'm going to guess that it's going to be fairly significant. I said 65, 70%.
That's very extreme. That's kind of the numbers up kind of Northern Territory and Queensland way. We're 21%. So
okay.
Aboriginal people in Victoria make up 1.8% of the population, but we make up 21% of the out-of-home care numbers. So it's 10 times more likely to be in out-of-home care if you're an Aboriginal young person.
Yeah,
So
that's
when I
pretty
saw
shocking.
that, that's crazy, isn't it? So
Yeah.
and that's my motivation to get to work. Like we've got so many of our kids in care, and pre-colonisation. And it's not just because Aboriginal people are lazy or can't be bothered working or don't understand education. Like pre-colonisation, this wasn't an issue. Kids were with family, with kin, learning Aboriginal law, all these kind of things. So the reason this is so high is the effects of colonisation and stolen generation and all these kind of things. The rate, so why our kids are removed, and this kind of document outlined this as well. So 38% of our Aboriginal kids are removed because of neglect, which is double non-Aboriginal kids. So neglect is up to the individual kind of. So DHS might go out to an Aboriginal house and they'll see that the kid's not wearing shoes, or the older brother's roaming around with the younger kid and they're going fishing, or mum's not around and the auntie's raising them, which is all traditional Aboriginal ways of doing business, and to be honest is fine. That's why we need to educate our DHS counterparts. But the rate of removal is double for neglect. So, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, these kind of things are a little bit more tangible and easy to kind of identify or tick a box. But yeah, so pretty crazy numbers there. But it just shows that we've got such a long way to go. Like, and this document, Family Matters, outlines what legislation each state's doing. And Victoria is so far more progressive than other states and territories, which gives me hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of these boxes, it's red, orange, or green, like traffic lights, and we've got a lot of green. But in saying that, like I said, with youth justice, mate, and with the work I do now, like I'd love to do myself out of a job, but let's be honest, it's never going to happen because the numbers are so crazy still. I think in youth justice, 25% of the cohort were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So again, way overrepresented.
That's mind-boggling. Is this report easily accessible?
Yeah, Google. Yeah, Family Matters. Snake.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what I'll do is we'll definitely put a link in it when we drop the episode so that people can. I know personally, I definitely want to have a read of that, but hopefully we can get a few more people to open their eyes and have a read of that as well. Let's touch on you just started a new role. Let's touch on what the changes are with that, and maybe what you're looking to achieve. I'm not going to ask you to outline your 5-year plan for me, but
I haven't got one of those, mate. No.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But yeah, what attracted you to the role, and where do you think you can make an impact?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to stay at VACCA. So I start this new role in kind of 2 weeks. So the new role is called Senior Education Advisor. I think it sells me a bit higher than what I am, but I'm so happy to stay at VACCA. I haven't applied for any other jobs since I've started at VACCA. I feel like I've been given a lot from where I work at the moment, and I equally like to think I give back a fair bit as well. But this role kind of came about during COVID when, we've got 700 staff, 1,000 of our kids in out-of-home care or systems that are with family but need supports that deal with education. And like I said before, education is so key. Article 26 of the Independent Human Rights is that everyone is entitled to an education and needs to be free and to develop to the full personality of the human being. So education is free, but making sure that schools are aware of that and parents choose which school their kids want to go to, I think is so important. Mate, for me, like, I don't tell many people this, but I was the first person in my family to finish year 12 in mum or dad's side of the families, which doesn't really sound like much. But then I was the first person to go to university, and I'm still the only person to kind of finish university in either side of my family. And it was a bit of a grind, mate, to get through the first degree, let alone the master's. But for me, doing that education has opened up so many doors and opportunities for me. And I just want all our Aboriginal young people to have that same opportunity, I suppose. So they're staying in school, they're not dropping out in year 8 and then getting into youth justice. They have opportunities and they have chances to break, I suppose, that cycle that I mentioned before. So yeah, I can't wait to get kind of stuck in, and it's just about, I suppose, being the go-to person at VACCA for education. So a lot of our caseworkers, like, bless them, they're on the ground doing the hard work, but they don't really know what the rights of each kid at a school is, or what an individual learning plan is, or what supports are available. So yeah, they'll be giving a bit of advice to, I suppose, VACCA's leadership team and attending certain meetings with the department and stuff. But I reckon I just hate when people release documents and they sound really good, but they don't know what they look like on the ground. I think from my experience in the last few years and teaching at Parkville, I know what our kids need on the ground and what they're missing. So I reckon I can be that bridge, hopefully. So, yeah, it's exciting to start in a couple of weeks. I'm going to have a week of annual leave, I reckon, just beforehand to reset the brain and have a bit of a break. But, yeah, really excited to stay at VACCA, as I said, because I've learned so much about myself and the Aboriginal community, and I can't wait to kind of make a difference and keep kind of doing that stuff.
Yeah, you need, that's a really good point you make. You sort of need someone who's sort of been in the trenches, I guess you could say, that can look at it from a different perspective, and probably the right perspective to change certain things that need to be changed.
Yeah, I reckon. And I find personally when I'm listening to someone give advice or talk, if they've walked the walk, then they can talk the talk. Whereas someone's just talking big fluffy words, sometimes you get a bit delusioned, or, I'd love to go and model a class or a school, or, sit in a care team meeting or something where I can model what I've done or what people need to do. So, no, it's exciting. And as I said, education, mate, it's the key and the key driver, I reckon, along with culture, which VACCA's motto is connected by culture. So there you go.
There you go. And I can see behind you, you proudly put up your university degrees for me as a little bit of a flex for everyone to see.
Oh, mate, you told me to do that in the pre-show. I had my Zoom background as a cafe, and you said that's got to go.
Yeah, I was chatting to a mate of mine, Jimmy, just before, and he had it similar. He had his degree set up above his jukebox, which was an interesting place to put it. But yeah, no, look, mate. To be honest with you, that was incredibly insightful for me personally, and it's definitely inspired me to one, learn more about Indigenous culture and Indigenous history, and two, to try and challenge other people to be the same. I think there's a right way to go about that, and not sort of say to people in an aggressive manner, like, you need to do this, you need to do that. You do need to challenge people in the right way. A lot of people are very difficult to change out of their ways, but no, that was a very insightful chat, and I do appreciate you giving me a lot of the numbers, because I think that's a very important, rather, as you say, rather than just giving us a story, to provide numbers as well, as that really sort of drives the message home.
And that's something, I think is if listeners can just begin their learning journey. It's a term that we use at work, a learning journey, that you're never an expert or you're culturally competent. I think that's more a university degree. You tick the box, but with our culture and with everything, you always need to be learning, and due to Aboriginal culture and the diversity and colonisation, you're never going to achieve that competence. So, if you can move from a 1 to a 2 out of 10 in the next week, or watch something with someone, or read something, or, as you said, challenge someone in a nice way. That's my approach too. I don't like forcing things down people's throats, but if you can be an ally, that'd be really good.
Absolutely. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to touch on.
No, mate. I think I've hit on enough things, but you're doing good things, mate, in the podcast world, and good to see you're always learning.
Appreciate that, mate, and I appreciate you jumping on to really educate myself, and hopefully a lot more people.
No worries, mate. Chat soon.
Awesome, mate. All right, stay safe. Take it easy.
See you, brother.
See you, mate.